All right, more things that are wrong with the news business. Actually, we should give credit to New York Times journalism here because they forced the government to have to acknowledge that this drone strike was just murdering innocent civilians.
Right, so, well, you guys will recall we brought you that New York Times investigation where they actually went and got the security camera video of the person who was the target of the drone strike, who was a past U.S. aid worker, who had applied actually for a U.S. visa. His family, small children, they were killed actually in that strike because the drone came almost exactly at the time when he walked out of the car and they're running towards it. Now, General McKenzie, the head of U.S. Central Command, came out and openly acknowledged that this strike was a, quote, mistake. Don't worry, though, there won't be any consequences. Let's take a listen to what he said.
Having thoroughly reviewed the findings of the investigation and the supporting analysis by interagency partners, I am now convinced that as many as 10 civilians, including up to 7 children, were tragically killed in that strike. Moreover, we now assess that it is unlikely that the vehicle and those who died were associated with ISIS-K or were a direct threat to U.S. forces. I offer my profound condolences to the family and friends of those who were killed. This strike was taken in the earnest belief that it would prevent an imminent threat to our forces and the evacuees at the airport. But it was a mistake, and I offer my sincere apology. As the combatant commander, I am fully responsible for this strike and its tragic outcome. Well, I've begun with the most important findings of our investigation.
And Krystal, just so you know, a further statement from the Pentagon made it absolutely certain, this is what they said, let's put this up there on the screen, which is that there will be no disciplinary action expected in the drone strike that killed 10 civilians, including 7 children in Afghanistan. There's a lot to be said here. Yeah. First, number one, it basically took a bulletproof investigation from the Times in order to show that this was a complete lie from the beginning. Number two, think about the conditions of this strike. We had people on the ground. We'd been in that country for 20 years. We knew the grid of Kabul because we used to occupy it. In terms of what the government has told us for years about drone strike, we'll probably never have as much visibility into an on-the-ground situation as what we did as what was happening at that time.
Yeah, that's true.
And it still was a total and complete disaster in terms of who we hit, why we hit, etc. Now think about the thousands more in Yemen, tribal regions of Pakistan,
Somalia,
Mali, Niger, shall I go on? Now we start to understand that when these people tell us something, it ain't always sometimes on the level. And maybe, just maybe, if we had been paying attention to this for the last, 20 years, the righteous anger of the American people at this strike, which I fully support, would also have maybe got us out of these wars in the first place.
Yeah, well, there is a lot to that. I mean, it's almost like, is progress? At least they're admitting it, because for years and years, I went and looked up the numbers. There have been over 13,000 drone strikes in Afghanistan that we know about. Mm-hmm. How much transparency do we have into who was actually killed in those drone strikes? Next to nothing.
Yeah.
Next to nothing. This was a rare instance where, because it was in Kabul and because the media was very interested in that moment in painting the Biden administration in a bad light, which they deserve to be in this instance, they actually did the digging to figure out what happened. And it truly was a superb piece of journalism, going back, viewing the security cameras as this aid worker went about his day, pressing the government and the military about, okay, well, what did you think was going on? Who did you think this person actually was? And ultimately tracking it down to the courtyard of his house, whereas he pulls his white Toyota into the courtyard, and his kids, their sort of daily ritual was to run out and jump into the car to greet daddy. That's when the drone strike hits. And then I just have to remind you the way that they lied about this too, because in order to convince people, they would never say from the beginning what ISIS target they hit. And by the way, there was another drone strike that they still have not said what ISIS target they hit in that one either, so have some skepticism there as well. But from the beginning, they wouldn't say who they hit. So instantly you're going, I've got some major questions about this. Also, why are you doing drone strikes in the middle of a busy residential area in Kabul? That you know is a busy residential area in Kabul. And part of how they justified this and tried to snow people is by saying, oh, there were secondary explosions, meaning there were explosives in the car, so we know we got the right guy. Total, complete lie. The only thing in that car, other than this man and his babies, were canisters of water. That's what was in the back of this car. So it is so revealing of the way that we operated in Afghanistan and the entire region now for literally decades. And here's the other thing as well, like, there are other instances where we know civilians were massacred and murdered. We know of the wedding party that was drone striked, killed 37 civilians. We know we bombed a hospital that was run by Doctors Without Borders, killing 42. We gave their family members, their surviving family members, $6,000 in reparations for that. But has there been any accountability for any of these horrific atrocities? No.
And that's what he said. No disciplinary action. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, said this was a, quote, righteous strike. The president defended it. The White House touted it. It was supposed to make them look strong. And this, like I said, this is just one out of many. I'm not minimizing it whatsoever.
No.
But it is very fitting that this would be the very last act of the U.S. military in Afghanistan, at least for the time being, that it would be a complete and total lie. And the Pentagon, the highest levels of the Pentagon, General McKenzie and the chairman lied to us. They put out that BS statement. They need to fully account and explain, I know this will never happen, but they need to come out and say, what was the intel? Why exactly did you strike this person?
Right.
So, according to what they've said so far, is that he was in a car and he went to a bunch of places and saw unusual amount of male activity that was detected. So that's the bar? That's what's enough in order to, you can also, I hear from these people all the time, ISR, our ISR capabilities, you wouldn't believe it. So you're not able to distinguish bomb-making materials from water jugs, which are what was in his trunk? That seems pretty troubling to me, and actually makes me question a lot of the stuff that was happening back in Iraq during the anti-ISIS campaign, whenever people would push for, okay, what's the proof? What do you have? And they say, oh, we got this on camera. And you look at this, apparently, it's 2021, it's been 5 years since that war. I assume the technology is supposed to have gotten better, and they completely and totally flubbed this one. And flub erases the people who actually died.
Right.
But even worse, look, 13 of our people were killed in a suicide bomb as a result of this. We actually should go get the people who are responsible. And so by killing a U.S.-backed civilian and his family, that's not justice for the actual service members who were killed in this strike.
Well,
so it's just it dishonors their memory.
Yeah.
It kills these people. It's just it makes me so mad at the entire military and chain of command on this one.
Well, and we all know why they went on such flimsy intelligence just to kill anyone, so that they could say, we got an ISIS-K target. Right. They didn't want the bad news cycle. I mean, we just lost servicemen and women, dozens of Afghan civilians murdered by suicide bomber and the resulting firefight. And so they wanted a positive news cycle of this righteous strike. We took out the bad guys. So they went on extraordinarily flimsy intelligence, obviously, and just murdered someone so that they could satisfy the news media's bloodlust. And it was the only positive news cycle that they got out of Afghanistan. It's also no accident that, most of these drone strikes go unreported, uninvestigated. This one they happen to look into in part because they were invested in making the Biden administration look bad at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's very clear why they did it. They did it because they wanted to get a good news cycle. I mean, imagine how disgusting and psychopathic that ultimately is. It's really horrendous. And then the other piece of this and why it's such a tragic and fitting end to this entire war is no one wants to say this, but the Taliban had a lot of popular support, and the Afghan army and the US lost a lot of popular support exactly because of these types of actions. I mean, if you know someone who got murdered at a wedding by an American bomb, how do you think you're going to feel about your occupiers? So the fact that we had so many civilian casualties, quote unquote, collateral damage throughout this war is a big part of what ultimately hobbled our effort there overall. Now, look, I mean, I think we shouldn't have been there for more than a very short period to start with. I don't think we ever should have been occupiers in that country. That was never the stated goal going in. We were never like, let's go in and nation build and build democracy. It was after we failed to get bin Laden at the beginning. We turned down the Taliban on their offer to turn him over. Then we're sort of stuck there in the country, like having to figure out some way to claim that it's a win. Even after bin Laden is killed, then in Pakistan, we still have to continue to justify all this expenditure and all this money and grift that's ultimately here. But this is the reality of what this war was effectively from day one.
Yeah, it was. And look, and this is the one thing on Biden, buck stops with him because he absolutely greenlit that strike. And
100%.
The White House needs to answer questions. The chairman needs to answer a question. The fact that there's no disciplinary action is completely shameful.
Insane. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut. Our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions. All that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.